Hi everyone, this is a quick overview of our 7th edition of the APA manual. So we're going to start out with really focusing on the important parts of the APA manual, or the most used parts of the APA manual. So this will help you to really structure your reference list and your citations and use those skills for professional writing. That's what our area of focus is building your skills as you move forward. So of course this is our APA manual, and then in chapter number 1 it goes into some of those very basic principles as far as scholarly writing and the different types of articles that are available, the ethical, legal, and professional standards as far as accuracy and compliance with ethical standards, as well as concepts of plagiarism and self-plagiarism. And I want you to kind of take a look at that, just a brief overview, that just knowing that we need to be very cautious about how we cite things and cite things appropriately, as well as not reusing work. And there may be some cases where you want to touch on the same topics, and that's okay. Our focus is on building on your skills and building your area of expertise and area of knowledge. So self-plagiarism is something that if you're going to use something that you've used before, you really need to get permission from your faculty member first before you do that, and you also need to cite appropriately. So just kind of a tip moving forward. In chapter 2, it just kind of breaks down the different types of, or the different parts of the manuscripts, and kind of how the manuscripts are structured. And then in chapter 3, it goes into the nitty-gritty as far as quantitative, qualitative, and mixed method research and those reporting standards. Chapter 4 goes into writing style, and this is an area that I suggest that you browse through, take a look at, especially when examining clear and concise. I'm using the word examine instead of look at, and that's how we should be writing. When we're writing in professional tone, we need to use appropriate word choice. We don't want to use expressions or what's considered semi-slang, like a lot of, those types of things. You don't want to use modifiers or any kind of qualifying terms that mean different things for different folks. And those words like very or great, those words really mean different things. So we want to be very cautious about putting any kind of quantitative terminology or descriptor when it isn't concise. So keep that in mind. We want to avoid any kind of jargon or informal language, conversational language we don't want to use. We want to use that very clear, concise, objective language when we're writing using professional tone. So always focus on our grammar and make sure that our verbs and our subjects match, plurals and such. So also just kind of take a look at this section. This will help you as you move forward in constructing your writing. Chapter 5 is important because it addresses bias-free language, and it addresses terms we use for individuals, and terms such as their, he, she, those types of things, and being very cautious about being sensitive to some of those labels and how bias can be triggered by names that may be either specifically female or specifically male, and that's why we use initials. We never use full names when we're doing our reference list and such. As we go into chapter number 6, we're going into the grammar related aspects. So we're looking at punctuation, spelling, capitalization, and key into capitalization and abbreviations and numbers especially. And just know that when we're documenting numbers in formal writing, kind of a general rule of thumb, but there are some exceptions that we need to write out in Word format any numbers that are under 10. So basically you would be writing out the words 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then you can start using the numerals as you hit on 10. And like I said, there are some exceptions to that, and that is included in the APA manual. Chapter 7, we won't be getting into this for this course as far as tables and figures, but this will help you as you move forward in the D&P program if that's the path. And also in Chapter 8, we're starting to look at those guidelines for citations, primary and secondary sources, just kind of a nuance. We always want to use primary sources when feasible. We don't want to have removed resources such as secondary resources. This goes through in-text citations, and I suggest that you tab your APA manual and see page 266 for examples, and also goes into using paraphrasing and quotes. And I do want to highlight the fact that we need to avoid quotes unless what we paraphrase would lose the meaning of the information. That's when we use quotes. Otherwise, it's best to paraphrase and use our own language when we're describing what we're reading in particular journal articles or references that we may use. Chapter number 9 goes into the reference list itself, the structure of the references, and there's basic components that are in each and every one of our references, and that would be the author, the date, the title, the source. There are variations to different types of references, so that's included in chapter number 9, and we always want to use alphabetical order when we're doing our reference lists. Chapter 10 has some reference examples, and they are very, very helpful. Pay special attention to those examples, especially pages 316 through 352. And these are some of the pages that you may want to tab in your APA manual. These are the commonly used pages in the manual, and like I said earlier, we don't use quotes a lot, but if you do happen to use a block quote is anything that has 40 words or more, and you use a different format for those types of quotes. And it gets into capitalization, titles and headings, and that's on page 167. Go into commas when we have a series of topics or words. What we do is we always, if there's more than 2 words, then you put commas behind the first 2 or more words, and always have a comma before the "and" that precedes the last word in the series. Again, we talked about conciseness and clarity. Those are some pages to really pay attention to. Colloquialisms and jargon. You wanted to take a look at that and know the examples of those things. Again, your in-text citations, your levels of headings, and just know on the inside cover of your APA manual there are resources there, and I believe that has the in-text citations and the levels of the headings on the inside of the front cover. In the inside of the back cover, you will find some common references and examples for those. So those are 2 really good tools to know that they're there, and refer to those to the covers, the inside covers of the APA manual. And moving on, these are just some examples for the for a book, for websites, as well as journals. So just know that that is available to you. And some of the most common mistakes that I see are capitalization in titles, italics, when to use them and what not to use them. So pay attention to your references when you use italics. You use, and back to the previous page, there are examples on where you put italics in the different reference lists, and as well as a designation of an author when the organization is is actually the author. So keep that in mind, that we can have organizations as authors, and you will be using that in this course, especially, and very often it's the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. So the in-text citations, these are some common types of in-text citations. So for the first citation is listed on this side, and the second citation in the paper the citations are listed on this side. So one work by two authors, always use the ampersand when it's within the parentheses. If you're using the author's names in part of the sentence, you would say, in this case, Albers and the word and instead of the ampersand, Renegarby, and then you would put in parentheses the 2017 discussed, and then go from there. So when it's in sentence format, we use the word and. When it's in the parentheses in a citation, then we use the ampersand sign. So kind of keep that in mind, because that's kind of a common thing too. The other thing is this pesky little period in the et al. Format. So make sure that you include that period after the AL, and then follow with a comma when you're using the in-text citations. And again, if you do use an organization that does have an abbreviation, you want to indicate the first time that you use it, the name of the organization. Then if it's within parentheses, you use the brackets to include the abbreviation for that particular organization. So kind of keep that in mind. So once you have indicated that abbreviation, you can then use, in this case, CDC throughout the remainder of your paper. So some of the most common issues with the in-text citations are that et al. Use that period right afterwards, and just know that you need to use that once you indicate the authors, then you need to use the et al. Format. Mistakes citing different groups and identifying them by abbreviations, and confusion on whether to use the ampersand or the word and when we're using parentheses versus non-parentheses in the citations. So here's some general tips as far as the manual itself, and like I mentioned earlier, there are resources in the inside of the front and back covers. Always use past tense when you're referring to literature, because it's been done in the past. Avoid attributing human action to a study, so to speak. So a study cannot find, the authors can find. So just keep that in mind. Keep in mind that the studies can't say something, but the authors can say something, those types of things. You want to exercise professional tone, clear and concise writing throughout, and just apply direct and clear delineation of the subject. So that's really important. Very often we refer back to things that may not be very clear for a reader when we use words like this, that, these. It is often very overused in writing, and it's probably best not to use it. Just saying. So with when you're typing your papers, use the 12-point font, and New Times Roman is the preferred for the nursing division. You want to avoid templates, even though they say they're APA compliant. Doesn't necessarily mean they're APA compliant. So you want to be very cautious about any kind of templates that you may be using. The other thing is make sure that all the references that you have in your reference list have a correlating in-text citation, and vice versa. If there's an in-text citation, make sure that there's a correlating resource in your final reference page. And here are some resources for you. Always use the APA style, if at all possible, that reference in addition to your APA manual, and the Writing Center is helpful too. So first and foremost, always use that APA manual. Use practice your skills as you move forward, and always ask questions. We're here to help you, and of course there's the reference. So thank you so much for listening to this, and let me know if you have questions.